Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something pretty intense that happened right in the heart of LA.
Shifting the whole vibe of a city, usually known for, well, sunshine.
Exactly. We're zeroing in on Los Angeles, June 13th, 2025. That afternoon, picture it. The air's not just warm, it's electric.
Tense. Definitely tense.
Right. Thousands of people are out protesting, part of this huge nationwide thing called the No Kings rallies.
Happening all over, wasn't it? Like nearly 2,000 spots across the country.
Yeah.
A really coordinated pushback.
It was massive. But LA that day became something else. It became the focal point.
It really did. Because this decision, it wasn't some slow policy change. It just landed. Like a shockwave.
And orders straight from the president, deploying active duty military onto the streets. In LA.
Unprecedented, really. I mean, not in decades, maybe ever quite like this. It just completely changed the landscape there.
Yeah, not your average Friday gridlock, that's for sure. So we've gathered everything we could.
Yeah.
Reports from the ground, legal takes, White House statements, personal stories.
A real mix of sources.
Definitely. And our job now, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack it all.
Okay.
What exactly went down? Why? What are the legal angles?
And the human cost, right.
Right.
How did it feel to be there?
Absolutely. And connect it to the bigger picture. It's like this legal firestorm wrapped up in a real-life drama.
And it happened fast.
Yeah.
LA, freeways, laid-back culture, suddenly feeling very, very different.
So these No Kings protests, thousands joined in LA, and the timing was key, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't random. They timed it deliberately to coincide with that big military parade happening over in Washington, D.C.
And kind of strangely, the president's 79th birthday, too.
Right. The whole No Kings movement itself, it seemed to be a reaction against what people saw as authoritarian creep, especially using federal muscle for domestic issues.
So reports say the LA protests started out, well, fiery, passionate, but mostly peaceful.
Yeah, the usual energy of a large demonstration, signs, chants, people making their voices heard, standard stuff initially.
But then the shift, the moment it all changed visually.
That's when the military arrived. And we're not just talking about troops, we're talking tanks.
Actual tanks on LA streets.
Rolling down boulevards that usually see, I don't know, Ubers and taco trucks. Not M1 Abrams.
It just changes everything. The atmosphere went from protest to something much heavier. Intimidating.
Yeah, and that image, tanks on Wilshire, that immediately sets off legal alarm bells. Big ones.
Flashing red lights, you said? Because the second that kind of hardware shows up for that purpose...
It triggers this fundamental legal question. A real lightning rod. And it all centers on a law most people might not even know exists, but it's crucial.
The Posse Comitatus Act, 1878.
That's the one.
Okay, let's really dig into this. Posse Comitatus sounds old, sounds legalistic. Why is it so central here?
Well, it's way more than just some old law. It's like a core principle for keeping civilian government, well, civilian. Think of it as a wall. A wall between the military and domestic law enforcement. It came about after the Civil War, specifically because people were deeply worried about using the federal army like a police force against Americans.
So no Army or Air Force acting as local cops?
Generally, no, unless Congress specifically says, okay, or there's an absolutely extreme emergency like a genuine insurrection the state just cannot handle. It's meant to be a really strong guardrail.
A guardrail to stop the military policing us day to day.
Precisely.
And based on everything we've seen, sending active duty soldiers, tanks even, to handle a protest in LA. Well, that seems to smash right into that guardrail, doesn't it?
Too many legal observers, yes. It looks like a direct challenge to the whole point of the act.
Which is why the legal challenge came so fast.
Almost immediately. You had this coalition of civil rights groups, the ACLU front and center, filing suit in federal court.
And their argument.
Pretty straightforward, actually. They're saying, using the military like this for protest policing flat out violates Posse Comitatus. It's unlawful.
They're not just asking for a pause then. They want it declared unconstitutional.
Exactly. They're saying the president's order itself was illegal from the get-go. It's not just bad policy in their view, it's fundamentally against the law.
It helps to compare this to other times federal forces have been used domestically, right? Like the '92 LA riots. That always comes up.
It does, and it's a really important comparison because the difference is critical.
Federal troops were there in '92?
Yes, National Guard mainly, and some federal assets. But, and this is the key, that only happened after the governor of California at the time, Pete Wilson, officially asked for federal help.
The state requested assistance?
Correct. The state authorities said, we're overwhelmed, we need backup, and then federal resources came in.
Okay. And fast forward to 2025 in LA.
The president just went around that whole process. He was unilateral. We know Governor Newsom definitely didn't ask for this.
His reaction was pretty strong, wasn't it?
Oh. Yeah. Called it a stunt. Said it put lives at risk. So you've got the federal government sending the military into a state for a policing role without the state's okay. That's a huge departure.
Has Posse Comitatus come up in other contexts? Like not riots, but maybe disasters?
It has, yeah. Hurricane Katrina is a big example from 2005. Federal troops were deployed then.
But the role was different.
Fundamentally different. That was about humanitarian aid, search and rescue, logistics, disaster relief. It wasn't about enforcing laws or policing the population.
So that distinction is crucial. Relief versus law enforcement.
Absolutely. And the legal experts looking at our sources, they seem pretty much in agreement. Using the military for crowd control at a protest without that state request, without it being an actual rebellion, it puts this whole decision on really shaky legal ground.
Okay, but there's another law that sometimes gets thrown around, the Insurrection Act, from way back in 1807. Could that be the loophole?
It's possible they might try to use it, but it's a tough sell. The Insurrection Act does let the president use the military domestically, but it's meant for situations like suppressing actual insurrection or rebellion, where state authorities literally can't enforce the law anymore.
And the LA protests, even with some issues, didn't seem like a full-blown insurrection.
Not according to most analysts looking at the facts on the ground. Calling it that seems like a massive stretch. The phrase we saw used was like trying to use a sledgehammer to crack a walnut.
Right, overkill.
Totally disproportionate. It's a tool for truly extreme breakdowns, not managing protests, even big ones. So relying on that act here probably wouldn't hold up in court, based on what we're seeing.
So if the legal basis looks weak, why do it? Why send the military to LA? What was the administration's stated reason?
Well, if you connect the dots back to things that said earlier, like the pre-election Agenda 47 plan.
Right, that plan talked about using the military domestically.
Explicitly. Mentioned immigration, mentioned protests. So the official justification now for LA is framed as national security. They argue local police are overwhelmed, they can't handle the chaos of immigration raids, plus these big rallies.
They're saying it's necessary for order.
Necessary to restore order, protect property. That's the official line.
But the sources we looked at suggest maybe another motive.
A very strong counter-narrative, yes. Critics argue this is much less about actual security needs in LA and much more about politics and optics.
The timing again. The D.C. parade connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Deploying troops the same day as that big military parade in D.C. That's highlighted over and over. It looks like a deliberate show of force, projecting power, maybe even tied to the president's birthday, not just reacting to LA.
It feels like flexing.
It does. And it's kind of ironic, too, because there were reports earlier suggesting a move away from that sort of, strongman rhetoric. This feels like swinging back hard in that direction.
Yeah. Okay, let's shift from the legal stuff and the politics. What about the people actually in LA on those streets? What was that like?
It must have been incredibly jarring. And yeah, the human side is vital. This wasn't abstract theory for them.
Who is out there protesting?
A real mix. College students, retirees, teachers, people concerned about different things, but united in this no kings idea.
Yeah.
And the stories, the anecdotes we found, they're really powerful.
Like Maria Gonzalez?
Yeah, a 28-year-old teacher. She was protesting deportations. When the military showed up, she said she felt like she was suddenly in a war zone. Said it didn't feel like America anymore.
A war zone? In Los Angeles? That's chilling.
It really is. And then you had James Carter, 65, a retiree. He put it with a bit of dark humor, but you feel the sting.
What did he say?
Something like, he came out to wave a sign, not dodge a tank. Joked, this isn't Call of Duty.
Wow, it just shows how surreal and out of place it felt.
Absolutely. That contrast between expecting a normal protest and facing military hardware.
And it wasn't just the protesters affected, right? Businesses got caught up, too.
Oh, for sure. Daily life got completely disrupted. We heard from a coffee shop owner right on Wilshire.
What happened to her?
Her windows got broken in the unrest. And then customers just disappeared, the streets were blocked, or just too tense. She said her neighborhood felt like a dystopian movie set.
So real economic impact, real fear.
Tangible negative effects on people just trying to live their lives, run their businesses. It's not just headlines.
And, in 2025, something like this, it explodes online instantly.
Oh, immediately. Those images, Humvees, tanks on LA streets went viral.
Yeah.
X everywhere, videos popping up constantly.
And the hashtag no kings.
Exploded.
Yeah.
Trended nationally, people reacting in real time.
Yes.
The mood on the ground, from what we gather, tense.
Yeah.
Defiant, definitely. People felt their rights were being trampled.
Right.
But also exhausted. Exhausted from all the tension, the stress of seeing your city militarized.
Yeah, a real mix. Now, we need to be balanced here. There was another side to the story. The administration, its supporters, they saw it differently.
They did, absolutely. The argument from that side, pushed hard by the administration and echoed online, was that this was totally necessary.
Necessary for what?
To restore order, to deter what they called rioters and illegal immigrants. They painted a picture of chaos, arguing local police couldn't or wouldn't handle it. We saw posts praising the move, saying it was essential.
And they pointed to things like broken windows, graffiti as justification.
Yes, that was the specific evidence cited. Vandalism. Proof that the situation needed this kind of response.
But did that hold up when checked against official reports?
That's where it gets interesting. The sources we reviewed compared those claims to LAPD reports. And yes, there was some damage, but the reports consistently described it as minimal. Certainly nothing like, say, the '92 riots level of destruction.
So a mismatch.
Of significant mismatch, it seems, which raises that sharp question again. Was this really about stopping minor vandalism, or was it about sending a much bigger, perhaps intimidating political message?
The swatting a fly with a bazooka comparison again.
It feels apt, given the scale of the response versus the reported scale of the problem.
And this LA deployment, traumatic as it was, it doesn't seem to be happening in a vacuum, does it? It feels like part of a pattern.
It absolutely fits into a broader pattern of actions we saw around that time, spring 2025.
Like what else?
Well, think about that controversial U.S. airstrike in Yemen back in April. Drew a lot of criticism over civilian casualties.
Okay.
Or the moves against universities like Harvard and Columbia, freezing federal funds, pulling over 1,000 student visas because of pro-Palestine protests on campus.
Actions that felt punitive.
Exactly. Less like standard policy, more like a crackdown. And then there's the economic side.
Yeah, tariffs.
Right. That huge 104% tax on some Chinese goods, explicitly called a weapon of leverage.
So Yemen, universities, tariffs, now LA.
You put them together, and a picture emerges. A willingness to use pretty aggressive tools, military, financial, administrative, across different fronts. Someone compared it to playing a global game of Risk.
Rejecting strength, consolidating power.
That seems to be the interpretation. Asserting dominance.
And within that game, LA could be a test, a domestic test case.
That's the big worry you hear from legal experts, from civil liberties groups. If this goes unchallenged, or if the courts somehow approve it,
it sets a precedent.
A dangerous precedent, they argue.
Yeah.
It could open the door to using the military like this in other cities facing protests. Chicago, Seattle were mentioned as potential next spots.
So it's not just about LA. It's about potentially eroding that line everywhere.
That fundamental line between military power and civilian authority. A shift with really long-term consequences for civil liberties in the U.S.
Because, as the sources kept saying, when the army becomes the local cop,
that separation just collapses. It changes the whole relationship between the government and the governed, shifts the power balance in ways many see as deeply unconstitutional, or at least against American tradition.
So where does it go from here? What are the next steps we're watching for?
The immediate focus is that legal battle. The lawsuit by the civil rights groups. There's a crucial federal court hearing scheduled for late June 2025.
And the stakes are high for that hearing.
Immensely high. If the judge rules against the president, we could see an injunction stopping the deployment, maybe preventing others. If the judge rules for the president, it gives a green light, potentially emboldening more actions like this.
And this feels like the kind of case that could climb the ladder.
Oh, absolutely. Posse Comitatus, federal versus state power. This has Supreme Court written all over it eventually, which just adds more time, more uncertainty.
And meanwhile, the protests. The No Kings movement.
Doesn't sound like it's stopping. Plans are apparently in the works for more rallies. Seattle, Chicago mentioned again. So the public pressure, the dissent, continues.
The mood still seems like that mix you mentioned, defiance and weariness.
Yeah, determination from opponents, but also just a fatigue from living through this period of intense division and seeing things like tanks on city streets.
Okay, so let's pull back. The big picture takeaway from LA.
I think it really throws that core democratic balancing act into sharp focus. Posse Comitatus isn't just some dusty old law. It represents a deliberate choice about not using the military domestically.
Maintaining that separation.
Exactly. And this LA incident just highlights all the risks when that line gets blurred or crossed. It's about the potential for unchecked power and how that changes the government's relationship with its own people.
It really forces a fundamental question on all of us, doesn't it? What kind of country do we want? When people protest, what's the response?
Is it dialogue, de-escalation, normal policing?
Or is it tanks? Is it military force becoming a go-to tool for domestic dissent? Does might make right, or does the rule of law, like Posse Comitatus, hold firm?
LA, in the summer of 2025, really put that choice right out there. A pivotal moment.
Raising huge questions about liberty, authority, the military's role. Just huge.
Definitely.
And, just to end on a slightly less heavy note, we did hear some whispers that maybe that big D.C. military parade, the one this all coincided with, maybe it wasn't quite the grand spectacle hoped for.
A bit underwhelming, perhaps.
Maybe. Perhaps those tanks in L.A. were just feeling left out, wanted their own parade route down Wilshire.
Or maybe they just heard the tacos were better on the West Coast.
Could be. But seriously, what we saw was protesters in L.A. making a massive impact, getting nationwide attention.
All without needing any military gear themselves.
Just signs, voices, and a hashtag that caught fire. Says something.
Right. Anyway, lots to chew on there. Definitely keep thinking about these things as you go about your day.